This video showcases my current Stormweaver build for Path of Exile 2. Throughout the video I'm going to explain how it works and what my endgame goal with it is. I've put a lot of time and effort into this, but I know I can make it even better. I've been postponing making this video for a few weeks now, holding off on sharing it because I wanted to make it perfect before I did. But the build is becoming so expensive that I've ended up hitting a wall due to me basically just getting burnt out from repeating the same activities in the game over and over again. So I'm sharing my entire build and the entire plan for the build in the hopes of finding someone who has some ideas to make it even better, maybe even someone that can help me finish it or finish it themselves. I'm currently at a level 97 Stormweaver, and the sole reason for me making this video is that I haven't seen anyone else with a similar build. While I do take inspiration from other content creators, it's not completely one for one. My passive tree does follow a similar route to the content creator Squishy, as I've found their route on the passive tree to be the most optimized for maximizing the amount of jewels that you can get without wasting nodes. And his route has allowed me to get a total of 18 jewel sockets, and once I gain those last 3 levels, I'll be able to gain this last jewel socket, giving me a total of 19 jewel sockets. In his build he gains an extra 2 jewel sockets, and that is solely because I go for a different build than his. Now you can't copy this build 100%. You do need specific jewels and gear, like for example this Megalomaniac diamond. It comes with Master Fletching and Mana Blessing, and this is 1 of 1. I haven't seen anyone else with this on the trade site. However, you don't need both of these for the build. The main one that you want is Master Fletching, and you can see it with the Mana Blessing. It actually gives me an extra 200 in mana in the bottom right. Another content creator that I take inspiration from is MAYGI's video on our 200% Shock Archmage build, and this is specifically regarding the Orb of Storms, as I was looking for ways to increase my shock magnitude without swapping out jewels on my tree, and the support gems used on Orb of the Storm in that video allows me to do just that. Now for the skills, I have Sigil of Power on my second weapon. Whenever I use the skill, it automatically switches me to the secondary weapon, which is the Chiming staff. You need to get this specific staff as it comes with the skill Sigil of Power. Now you don't specifically need these exact stats, however I do recommend that you get the +6 level to all spell skills. As you can see, whenever I switch to the staff, it increases my other skills by 6. And that obviously increases all the stats on all the other skills. You can obviously get Intelligence Max Mana and Mana Regen, so that it has a similar mana pool or higher than if you're using your primary weapon. For Sigil of Power, I'm using Persistence. This is for the increased skill effect duration, so whenever I use Sigil of Power it will last longer. Then I have Magnified Effect. This increases the area of effect, which is just how big the circle is. And then Wind Wave. So whenever I'm stunned, I can just use this skill and I'll be no longer stunned. Now for Spark, we have 5 gem sockets. We upgraded the quality to 20. With the quality upgraded, we gain an extra 4 projectiles. You always want to upgrade the quality. And for Spark, we have the 5 sockets with the +1 corruption. And for support gems, we use Execute. This increases the damage of hits against enemies that are on low health by 40%, and this is only for hits that don't count as damage over time. Then we have Inspiration for the 40% less cost. This is essential to the build, as the amount of mana drain without it is too substantial to sustain, and that's only due to Archmage using up a lot of mana. So without this, you will see that my mana drains instantly. However, with it equipped, the mana takes a significantly longer amount of time to drain. And then these last 3, we have Controlled Destruction. Since we're playing a non-crit build and we don't have any critical hit chance anyway, you may as well use this. This increases the damage by 30%. This is just a flat 30% increase. As you can see, 531 all the way up to 634. Then we have Cast Speed. Since we don't actually have that much cast speed on any of our gear or in the tree, since we're using a bow and quiver, we don't gain cast speed. The only way we get it is from rings and amulets and the passive tree. And then the last one that we use is Considered Casting. So we reduce our cast speed, so we lose 15%, but since we have Arcane Tempo, we only lose 10%. However, with this we gain an extra 4% with spell hits, and obviously Spark is a spell. That increases it by another 100,000. Now the majority of our damage does come from Archmage due to Archmage's scaling. However, you should keep in mind that you don't need a fully maxed out Archmage, as having a level 22 Archmage only decreases the non-channeling spells cost down to 4.95% instead of 5%. 25%. So there's no point in wasting your divines on a level 22 one or a level 20 gem with the +1 corruption. Just get a level 19 gem with +1, and then we're going to use the support gem Lightning Mastery for the extra +1, which will get it to 21. You can obviously go for level 22 if you want, however it only gives you a 0.05% increase on your mana cost. Now for Spark, we want the weapon set to be set to 1 only, so that we're using our bow and quiver instead of our staff, and we want ARCHMAGE to be set to 1 as well. The rest of these skills we want to have on weapon 2 instead of weapon 1, and that is due to the skill tree that we have, and the staff giving us +6 to all spell skills. Without it we have level 21, with it we have 27. And for ARCHMAGE, it's essential for you to put quality on this. I've seen a lot of people playing Stormweaver without putting quality on their ARCHMAGE. As you can read from the additional effects from quality, you gain lightning damage for every 100 mana you have. You need to put quality on your ARCHMAGE. This increases the amount of damage your Spark does significantly. Now for Conductivity, this is the curse that we place on the ground. Any enemies that enter it have a reduced resistance to lightning. Currently on the skill I have -38% and it lasts for 7.8 seconds. However, we increase this with the skill tree and we can lower the resistance to 70%. Now we have +6 from the staff, and we want to put quality on this as well, as this will increase the effect of the curse. We want a level 21 gem, and we only need 3 gem sockets. Cursed Ground, this basically makes it so the skill affects the enemies as long as they're within them. Then we have Heightened Curse. This increases the effect of curses, so it allows the resistances to be even lower. And then we have a Ritualistic Curse. This just means that your skill takes slightly longer to activate, however it has an increased area of effect of 50%. Now the 30% delay doesn't really matter because we're using Cursed Ground anyway, so whenever they're standing in it, they get cursed. And you can see whenever I activate it, you'll notice that it doesn't erupt straight away. Now for Orb of Storms, we use this on our secondary weapon as well. We want it to be a level 20, and we get the +6 from the staff. Having that extra 6 levels allows us to chain an additional time, along with the orb shooting out 35 bolts instead of just 29. This just creates an orb of electricity on the ground that fires lightning towards enemies. This is the orb here. The support gems that we have on this is specifically for getting more shock magnitude, but we can gain some additional benefits from the support gems. We have Lightning Exposure. This inflicts lightning exposure when it shocks an enemy, and it lasts for 8 seconds. This is just a debuff that lowers the enemy's resistance, and the default that it inflicts is 20%. Strip Away, this just increases the effect of the applied exposure by 30%. Then we have Overcharge, the main purpose we're using this, and this is for the 75% increased magnitude of shock. However, we're constantly shocking the enemy anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And this just allows us to deal more damage. Then we have Conduction. This just increases our chance to shock by 100%. And Shock is an ailment, which basically allows us to deal 20% increased damage constantly. And then we have Font of Mana. This increases our mana regen by 40% for you and your allies. As you can see under mana, total mana recovery per second, whenever I use it, it goes up by 200. And we use quality on this so that it allows us to chain 3 more times. Next we have is Skeletal Cleric. This is used together with Soul Offering. This just allows you to spawn in 2 additional minions, and you want to make sure it's on your secondary weapon since we only have 100 spirit. And Skeletal Cleric uses 20 spirit per skeleton, so we can gain 2. So we just put 2 on the Skeletal Cleric at the bottom right. Now the support gems doesn't matter. I'm using Meat Shield and Last Gasp, and then we use Soul Offering. This impales your skeleton minions, giving you a guaranteed buff to your spell damage, and we want to get this to level 21 with corruption and 3 sockets. Now with this buff it gives 41% increased spell damage whenever you use it, and with quality it can last for an additional second, and with the skill tree we obviously gain extra duration as well. The support gems we want is Dance Macabre. This increases the buff effect and it deals more damage, which is exactly why we have the additional skeleton, so that we can impale both of them, and that allows us to deal an additional 30% more damage. We then have the Minion Mastery for the +1, and then Ablation. This increases the effect by 30%, and we sacrifice 15% of our life, and it deals an additional 30% more damage. Now since our life is our mana, and we use mana regen, the 15% life doesn't even matter since we regenerate it instantly. And then our last skill is Blink. You can have this on any level you want. The higher the level, the further you teleport. And we want the quality for the cooldown recovery. We want 1 socket for Ingenuity, and that allows us to have a 30% increased cooldown recovery rate, which allows us to blink more often. And we have this on our weapon set 2 as well. So whenever we're on weapon 2, we have Skeletal, Cleric active and Blink. That uses up our 100 spirit. And you'll notice the Archmage is disabled whenever we have our secondary weapon. Then whenever we swap to our first weapon, it reactivates and disables the bottom 2. Now for the skill tree, these are the Ascendancy nodes that we want. We want to grab the extra 4% mana. Then we want to grab Arcane Surge. This is just a passive that works in the background, and this gives 10% more cast speed and 20% more mana regeneration rate. Then we want to grab the extra mana, and then we want the 1% increased effect of Arcane Surge per 15 mana. And then we want to grab Shock Chance. This allows us to shock the enemy more often, along with Strike Twice. This allows us to shock the enemy twice, increasing the damage from 20% to 40%. And then we grab Elemental Damage for the 12% increased damage, and then Scoring Wins. So the exposure that we inflict is increased by another additional 20%. Now for the nodes, we want to come up on the left. We want to grab Spell Damage, and then the attributes for Intelligence. Then we want to come in here for Raw Power, 20% increased damage and Intelligence. Then we keep going up here with the Intelligence nodes. And then we want to come up here and grab this dual socket. Then come over to the left, grab all these intelligence nodes, an extra dual socket, intelligence, intelligence. Then come all the way down here, grab this other dual socket. Then we want to come up here for the elemental damage. This gives us 50% increased elemental damage, along with plus 5% to all elemental resistances. That has only 3 nodes for plus 5, and this basically allows us to counteract the controlled metamorphosis. Then we want to come up here and grab Mind Over Matter. This basically makes it so all our damage is taken from mana instead of energy, shield and health. Then we grab some extra intelligence, and then we come up here and grab another dual socket. Then we start making our way around the tree to the right. We want to grab these intelligence nodes, the extra dual socket. We want to grab the Eldritch Battery. This converts all energy shield to mana. So any energy shield that we had will now become our mana instead. Then we want to come up here and grab these cast speed nodes. This increases our damage even further, plus we gain the 15% mana regen and the plus 10 to intelligence. So I find it worthwhile grabbing these. Then we grab the extra dual socket, come down here and grab Chaos Inoculation. This reduces our life to 1, but it makes us completely immune to chaos damage. So we don't even need chaos resistance, it doesn't even matter. Then we keep making our way down, we grab this extra dual socket, keep coming down. We want to grab this dual socket up here. Then we grab this dual socket. Every single attribute node will be intelligence. And then we want to grab this dual socket here, this one here, this one down here, another one here, another one here, another one here. And then once we make it to the bottom of the tree, we want to come straight down. We grab this extra dual socket, and then we want to grab these attribute nodes, which will give us plus 3 per 1. We're going for Polymathy, which gives us 10% increased attributes to all attributes. That allows us to gain even more intelligence and balance out our strength and dexterity for our secondary weapon, so that whenever we swap to it, we do not unequip any gear. Then we come to the left, grab this extra dual socket and this dual socket. And now for the weapon set skill nodes, we split 11 of our skill points into 22 for weapon set 1. When we're assigning the skill points for weapon 1, we want to come back up to Eldritch Battery, and we want to grab these mana nodes here, and then we grab Arcane Intensity, 3% increased spell damage per 100 mana. Right now, with the amount of mana that we have about 270%, and it just keeps going higher and higher with the more mana we have. So having more mana also increases our damage. And then raw mana increases our maximum mana by 12%, which is huge. However, it increases the cost for skills, which doesn't really matter since we have mana regen anyway. And then when we make our way down to the right side of the tree, we use the skill points from weapon set 1 to get this intelligent node and these lightning damage nodes, along with Wild Storm, which is 50% more maximum lightning damage. Now, due to the Megalomaniac diamond that I'm using, I don't actually allocate Wild Storm to this. If I did, I would save these 6 nodes. However, since I'm allocating Master Fletching and Mana Blessing, I actually save 8 nodes instead of 6. So I find that to be more efficient. And then for weapon set 2, we come up to the top here and we grab all of these cursed duration and increased cursed effect. This makes the curse skills last longer and the effect higher. And then we come up here and then we grab all the other curse effects along with Master of Hexes. And since we have 2 more skill points in our weapon set 2, we may as well well just grab these other curse nodes as well. Now for the jewels that I'm using, I'm mainly focusing on grabbing 15% bonus gained from equipped quiver along with intelligence or resistances for the corruption, and it has to be a magic jewel. So since we're using the Adorned diamond, this increases the effect of jewels that are corrupted to magic jewels by 90%. So since this is increased bonus gained from equipped quiver, 15% increased by 90% gives us 28%, and this also counts towards the intelligence as well. So the more intelligence we have, the more mana we have, and the more damage we deal. For my Megalomaniac diamond, we allocate Master Fletching and Mana Blessing. This is a 1/1 diamond. However, you can grab Master Fletching for about 100 exalts. However, I don't think you're going to be able to grab both. That allocation gives us Mana Blessing, which is 5% increased maximum mana. You'll see that again, an extra 250-ish mana with Mana Blessing equipped. And then we also have Master Fletching, which gives us 30% increased bonuses gained from equipped quiver. This is essential for the end game build that I'm going for, like the absolute peak of this build. Then we have the Against the Darkness Time Loss diamond. We allocate it here so that we can have the notable passive skills Drenched and Lightning Quick. And this diamond is not perfect. However, this is what I'm using currently, which is just increased intelligence. I don't really need the cold resistance, but since it has 4% increased intelligence for notable passives, I gain an increase of 8%. However, instead of cold resistance, I would preferably want a gain of 4% to extra lightning damage, as that would increase the damage even further. As for this jewel here, this allows us to allocate skills in the skill tree without actually pathing towards them, as long as the skills are within this circle here. And thanks to the diamond having a massive ring, that allows us to do that. So we save a lot of nodes that were usually spent going for these. And with this diamond, that allows us to get pure power. That increases our damage per 10 intelligence. And with my current intelligence of 940, that gives us an increase of 188% to our lightning damage. So the more intelligence, the more damage we deal as well. Then we also grab Eldritch Will, which increases our maximum mana by 3%. And then we grab Lightning Quick, which is increased lightning damage along with cast speed and intelligence. And we gain the intelligence from the diamond, obviously. And then we have Drenched, which gives us 40% increased chance to shock. And chance to shock is obviously good, as it allows us to deal more damage as well. And then the increased intelligence. We do gain 5% lightning damage as cold damage. However, this is basically useless. Now, for the majority of these emeralds, we're just filling out resistances and gaining the increased bonus gained from equipped quiver. Ideally, we want to get all of these to 15% if we're going for the peak end game build. However, there are breakpoints that you can go for, and you can calculate the percentages to gain the exact amount. This emerald here, we have cold resistance and equipped quiver, intelligence, equipped quiver. Then we have fire resistance, elemental ailment, and then bonus again from equipped quiver. And then fire resistance and equipped quiver, and intelligence equipped quiver, fire resistance equipped quiver, intelligence equipped quiver, fire resistance equipped quiver. And these last four at the bottom here are all intelligence with extra damage. So I have 9 intelligence and increased lightning damage, 9 intelligence projectile damage, 9 intelligence elemental damage, and then 9 intelligence projectile damage. And I'm currently working on replacing these last 4 emeralds with the bonus to quiver. That will give me an extra 100%. Since I'm using 90% Adorned, these 15% turn into 28%. So as long as it has 25%, I will always gain an extra level to Spark from 2 jewels, since it only takes 50% increased quiver for an additional level. Now obviously the ideal emerald would be movement speed and increase the bonus again to equipped quiver. However, I've been really unlucky with crafting these, and I'll try to replace these later on if I'm able to craft them. Now, why do we have a bunch of emeralds with increased gains from equipped quiver? This is due to the gear on our character. Since our quiver has +2 level of all projectile skills, every 50% increased bonus to quiver gives us an additional level on top of this +2. As you can see, whenever I remove the quiver, this drops my DPS down to 130,000 and I lose 14 levels. So the majority of my damage does come from the quiver. Now the nice thing about the quiver is it also gives increased projectile speed, dexterity, and chance to pierce. Right here you can see projectile speed modifier is 300, and that is due to the actual quiver. giving us an extra 300%, which allows us to actually drop acceleration in Spark for the execute, since we no longer need the extra projectile speed. However, with the acceleration, we go from 324 all the way up to 494, but we don't actually need this anymore. We can swap it out for additional damage. Additionally, once I do replace those other 4 jewels for the increased quiver bonus, I will most likely have over 1,000 pierce chance, along with some additional projectile speed modifier and more dexterity. As you can see, I gain all of my dexterity from the quiver, and it's a huge chunk as well. And with the extra dexterity, that just allows us to have the additional accuracy rating. Previously, before, I was actually testing natural immunity plus 4 element threshold per dexterity. However, I find that I don't have many more skill nodes left, so wasting the additional 2 nodes for that is pointless. Now, a huge chunk of your damage will come from your bow as well. We want the WIDOWHAIL CRUDEBOW for the 300% increased bonus gain from equipped quiver. That increases the +2 to a +8, and we want to have 2 sockets on this weapon for the Soul of SKELETAL, which recovers 4% of mana per kill. So whenever we're crowded with enemies and we're taking damage, whenever we deal damage with Spark, it allows us to recover our mana instantly. For the gloves, we want high energy shield, so we have 2 stats for energy shield, increased and maximum, and then we have max mana, intelligence and cold resistance. Now I have dexterity on my gloves for the sole purpose of whenever I swap weapons, you'll notice that my dexterity lowers down to 60, and while I'm using my secondary weapon without these gloves equipped, my chest piece is also unequipped. And if I don't have that additional dexterity, what happens is whenever I swap, my chest piece becomes unequipped, and that gives me a huge chunk of mana, which means whenever I swap to my secondary weapon, I lose a lot of mana, so that whenever I swap back to my primary weapon, I have to actually recover all of that mana, which makes your character more vulnerable. However, when I have that extra dexterity, it means that I don't have to recover anything. I obviously use the Ingenuity utility belt for the increased bonuses gained from equipped rings. Almost every build will be or should be using this. However, I don't go for the 90% increased bonuses from the rings, since I'm lacking so much lightning resistance. I instead sacrifice the 10% for lightning resistance on it, and that actually allows me to cap out my lightning resistance to 75%. Now for the rings, I use a breach ring with an enchantment of elemental resistances. That allows me to finish off my fire and lightning resistances, and on this ring I have lightning damage, accuracy, max mana, cast speed, intelligence and mana regen. Now these rolls could be higher, however this is just as best as I could get it. Now ideally I would like to replace this with another dream fragment, however dream fragments are so expensive, plus I would want one with a +7 so that I could replace my resistances as well, and I've been gambling a bunch of dream fragments. I think I've done 10 of them this week, just buying and reselling. However, whenever I corrupt them, I always never get what I want. For the chest piece we use MORIOR INVICTUS, and we want it to have the 5% increased attributes per socket rune or soul core, and then the 5% increased maximum mana per rune or soul core, and then we want to corrupt this to have 5 sockets, which then we put SKELETAL in for the 2% increased maximum mana, and with the 5 sockets we gain 10% increased maximum mana. Since we have 5 soul cores, that gives us 25% attributes and 25% maximum mana as well. That gives us a total of 35%, which is huge. For the other ring, I use Dream Fragment with the 24 increased maximum mana. Now I don't have the MAXROLL mana regen, but this doesn't matter since I'm actually gaining more from the corruption. I actually gain 83% increased mana regen. However, you can actually get a slightly better Dream Fragment with a 28% increased max mana. Now my cold resistance is already capped anyway, so I could actually afford to lose some cold resistance elsewhere. But the nice thing about the Dream Fragment is that you cannot be chilled or frozen. I did try to make a build without this, however it becomes relatively annoying to always be frozen in place from enemy attacks, so I've opted to just go with this anyway. For the helmet I use the Expert Feathered Tiara. I have increased energy shield and maximum energy shield, along with maximum mana, intelligence and then resistances. It doesn't matter where your resistances are, you just want to to fill out your resistances so you can cap them to 75%. And then I corrupted this helmet. I actually had a slightly better helmet, but I ended up corrupting it and reducing the max mana. And the soul cores we use here is Zalotl again. This gives us more mana. Since we gain more mana, we deal more damage. Better have these soul cores instead of the iron runes. For the amulet, I could actually get a slightly better amulet with cast speed instead of strength. However, I would have to get the strength somewhere else. Maybe I would get a dream fragment with strength instead of mana regen, and then I could get cast speed on the amulet. However, for me, I'm currently allocating lightning rod, and I use the Azure amulet for the 25% increased mana regen, along with spell damage, maximum energy shield, max mana, and +3 to projectile skills, which gives us +3 to spark as well, along with 78% increased mana regen. That gives us more survivability. And lightning rod basically makes all my lightning damage with non-crits lucky, and that basically just means that whenever you deal damage to an enemy, the damage number is rolled twice and it picks the better value. Say for instance on our spark, we have a lightning damage here and it's between 13,000 and 296,000. Whenever I deal damage to an enemy, it will pick a number between those two values. However, with lightning rod, it will pick two numbers between these two values, and it will pick the highest number and it will deal that damage on that one specific hit. And it does that calculation for all 28 projectiles that are fired per use of spark. For the boots, these are near perfect boots. I can obviously gain slightly more movement speed, and I can also gain one more socket on the boots as well. However, I'm pretty happy with these because they have good resistances. So we want movement speed, increased energy shield, or maximum energy shield, along with maximum mana, intelligence, and resistances to fill them out. We don't actually need a life flask since everything is from mana. However, we use the melting MAELSTROM mana flask. This allows us to recover all our mana instantly, and since we're immune to chaos damage, whenever it deals damage to us, it doesn't deal anything. So say for instance my mana is close to 0, I can then use my mana flask, which will then refill the entire mana pool instantly. And the nice thing about this is we have actually 75 charges and it only consumes 10 per use. Now for mapping, I mainly only use two skills, and that is Spark and Sigil of Power. So whenever I'm in a map, all I do is tap Spark and it kills everything instantly. I also use Blink in most maps. I just swap to my secondary weapon and blink around for some additional movement speed. But basically whenever I'm not doing bosses, the only skills I use are all mapped to my mouse. Then the skill rotation for boss clears. Say for instance the King in the Mist. My skill rotation for that is to place down Sigil of Power. I then switch to Spark again, and every single stage I gain more DPS for Spark, as you can see here. At stage 4 I'm at 1 million DPS. Once I reach stage 4 I switch back to the secondary weapon, which is the staff, which will then spawn my skeletal cleric. I then impale them with Soul Offering, then I use Conductivity to reduce the resistances, and then Orb of the Storm for the shock magnitude. With all of that combined, I almost reach 1.7 mil, and I can actually push this build even further. Now I did actually make a MAXROLL POE2 planner guide, and this planner is specifically to display the absolute maximum stats per item, which allows me to just optimize and compare my in-game gear to the planner and identify any missing points or percentages that I could further enhance on my build. Now if I fully max out this build that I'm going for, I can reach 750% bonus to Quiver, which will allow me to get a level 42 Spark, and if I get my hands on a Prism of Belief diamond, that will give me an extra +3, and if I get an absolute perfect amulet with a +3 level to all projectile skills and a corrupted +1 to all skills, that would increase my ARCHMAGE and my Spark even higher, getting my Spark to level 45. I'll have this MAXROLL guide in the description below. The only issue with this is that if you want to reach the absolute maximum with Spark, you will need a 100% Adorned diamond. I actually created an Excel sheet with every single percentage of the Adorned diamond. The number on the left from 1 to 15 is the bonus to equipped Quiver on the emeralds, and the percentages on the top are for each percentage of Adorned. I'll also have this Adorned percentage cutoff spreadsheet in the description as well if you want to look at it. It's pretty simple math. You basically basically just take whatever bonus to equipped quiver you have. Say for instance I have 15, I do 15 times 1 point and then whatever percentage. If I go for 86%, that'll give me 27.9, which is right there. This spreadsheet could be useful if you just want to look at the numbers to determine what's a good cutoff point for you. Usually the cutoff points you want to go for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100, and that is also because on your corrupted jewels you'll have intelligence, and if you have a plus 10 intelligence jewel you'll want to have those cutoff points in the 10% intervals. As say for instance I have a 90% adorned and I have plus 10 to intelligence, that will increase the intelligence to 19 intelligence. Now with the build I'm going for, it will have 14 jewels with bonus to quiver. Now since I only have 15% and I have a 90% adorned, that only gives me 28.5. So if I did 28 times 14, that gives me 392% a bonus to equipped quiver. Now I have master fletching, which gives me plus 30, and then 300 from the actual bow. Now as of right now I only have 10 jewels with 15% to bonus equipped quiver. However, I'm planning on getting 14. So if I do 28 times 14, that'll give me 392, and then plus 30 from master fletching, that'll give me 422, and then 300 from the bow, 722, level 44. For the absolute peak of the build, I actually need to get a 100%, which gives me 30. Since 15 increased by 100% is an additional 15, giving me a total of 30. 30 times 14 gives me 420, plus 30, 450 plus 300, 750. So if I ever want to reach this absolute peak, I will need a 100% adorned to gain that last level. So that's my entire build. You don't have to copy this one for one. However, if you want to reach level 45 spark, you will need to have 750% quiver. Now you could actually probably half every single stat on here and still be satisfied with the build, and it'll be even cheaper. Say for instance you're looking at this helmet, you don't need the intelligence to be 33, you could just drop it down to 20. The resistances don't need to be 40 either, you can drop it down to 30 or 20. However, since we don't have much resistances anywhere else, we do need the resistances more. And then the max mana you can drop along with the energy shield and you would still get a decent outcome from the build. However, this is just me trying to push it to its absolute limit. I do also have my Atlas tree on here as well. One thing I haven't done yet is the logbook tree, as I haven't actually done any logbooks in this game yet. However, everything about my build is on this planner. If you have any improvements for this build, just let me know in the comments below. Maybe I've overlooked something. However, I do truly believe that I'm reaching the absolute peak of this build. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks for watching.